For a kick-off, the story is Vera Brittain's. It's based on her memoir. It's about a young lady, quite a remarkable young lady, highly intelligent, very talented, who had aspirations to become a writer, and her relationship between her brother, her lover, and their good friend Victor, and what happened to them during 1914 to 1918. I play Edward, her brother. His story fits in that, partly through having not really, that sort of very typical teenage thing of their parents wanting different things for them. They kind of bond over that. They have a very close relationship. I remember James saying that they're almost like twins. So that's sort of where Edward exists in relation to her. And in terms of, there was a final part to your question which escapes me. Why it's important? Because although it was a war, as you say, that was 100 years ago, I think the reasons that wars like that happen are in fact just inherent in what we are as humans, and the reasons these things happen are often the same, and I think it's nice to actually, these people were just swept up in it. They have absolutely nothing to do with the politics of it. It's not their war, but it cost them a lot, and I think that's the same with all wars as well, and that's why it's important.
I think ultimately you always have to serve the script, and to do anything else is not... You're then not serving the story you're telling, because we're telling the story of Vera Brittain according to what Juliet has written and what James Kent wants, But then again, there's also a weight of responsibility, given the fact that there's this lady here, Shirley Williams, because we know these are real people, and there's a weight of responsibility to being faithful to the fact or what you can find out about the fact. So it's a balance, I think. It's a bit of a juggling act.
You're having a fantastic time at the moment. We're so excited also about Kingsman. We're going to have that soon. It's a very different type of project. Can you tell us just a little bit before you leave us about what fans can expect from that one?
What you can expect from that one is a very, very different film. Tonally, it's entirely opposite end of the spectrum. That's kind of... that film employs violence in a very comic book fashion to sort of show good, hopefully triumph over evil, whereas Testament is a far more naturalistic, sober view of what violence and war costs us as humanity. But Kingsman is great fun. It features some stellar performances from the genii that are Colin Firth, Sam Jackson, Michael Caine, Mark Strong, and I'm kind of slap bang in the middle of it, launched into this very strange world.
I think the first and I guess most obvious thing is that it comes from Vera herself, a woman of the time, in which that story of resilience, that story of overcoming the impossible, is told from her point of view. I think accounts of the First World War, I think we do very much see it from the front, from the fighting, from the battles. I think we forget about the battle that happened at home, the battle of loss, the women who stayed at home and tried to maintain some form of platform, some form of foundation to keep themselves sane, to keep life going on. Vera was unique because she didn't think, in a way, it seems, how a lot of women thought at the time. She had a drive above and beyond what was regarded as normality, and I think it's that resilience of her spirit, her passion, her drive, her overcoming the impossible to achieve what she thought was right. She was tough, and she wasn't afraid to fight for it. Alicia, from word go, right from when we were in the audition room and did chemistry reads, she was just on the ball. She just, she has an instinctive, emotional connection, I think, with Vera, particularly. I think her toughness, her drive, she likened Vera a lot of the times on set to like this bird, this thing that was fragile, but yet I think determined and flight. This idea of determination, and I think Alicia's got that in her in buckets. She can sort of switch from emotion to emotion in seconds, and she's fantastic to work with, and I think her performance in the film is just astounding. Victor is one of Vera's friends through her brother Edward, and Victor has a little bit of a soft spot for Vera. I think when he visits their home, he very much hopes that something might blossom between them, but things don't quite go that way. Victor's very much, I think, his strength of spirit, I think, comes from his inadequacy, I guess, to be one of the men. He's denied to fight in the war, and so he's faced with a lot of shame over that. And so so he has to stay strong in different ways. Stay strong for Vera, stay strong for himself, and stay focused. I think he very much represents the guy who found it hard to succeed, and I guess the guy who lost a lot, and they all lost a lot. As Vera says in the film, you know, the youth was stolen from us, and that sums it up perfectly.
Has the experience of telling that story, of making this film, change your perspective on what that generation went through and what war truly means?
Absolutely. I mean, that's. I think that is the main message of the film. Is knowing what you've got. I mean, you know, if you're lucky enough to have your youth, you know, to you know, not waste it, to not be gazing at your phone all day, you know, to maybe look up every now and again and see what's around you, because under very different circumstances, you know, 100 years ago, you know, we weren't so lucky.
And what else have you got coming up in 2015? Obviously a big year for you.
Yes, I'm currently filming a TV series called Humans for AMC Channel 4, which is coming out later in the year, which is going really, really well so far. And also a film called Legend, which Tom Hardy playing both Cray twins, which is coming out later in the year as well. So we're very excited about both.
Do you have a message to fans finally about this film before you leave us?
Yeah, I would say watch this film with as open a heart as you can, as focused a mind, and take what inspiration from it what you can.
I think it's a story that's not been told really. It's the First World War from the perspective of a woman at home, and I can't remember a movie that's done that before, and it's a very important topic to discuss. And actually, in this movie, you don't see the front. You don't see the fighting lines a lot, and that's unique as well. And yet, it's incredibly moving. And Alicia does an amazing job of playing Vera. I think that's really why.
I mean, I'm curious, how does the experience of telling a story like this that deals with the human impact of real-life atrocities compare with your kind of day job at the moment, dealing with the kind of more fantastical horrors of Westeros?
They don't compare, really. This was an event that happened, an event that needs to be paid great respect to. My Game of Thrones life is a fantasy, like you say, and one that is not telling the story of any normal person or any human person, and I think that's the major difference.
I mean, this is very much a story about people and their relationships. Can you talk a little bit about working particularly with Alicia in bringing that relationship to life on screen?
Yeah, it's I've been friends with Alicia for a couple of years now, and she's a very good friend, and we were friends for the 2 years when we met, but until we did this movie, and so I was really hoping that it would work, because you know that we would work chemistry-wise and that we wouldn't just fall out the minute we got on set. But she's amazing. She works in exactly the way I like to work, which is in a sort of very kind of detailed manner, but without getting too serious, and so we shared that.
For you personally, is there a particular scene, a particular moment in the story that really kind of sums up the message of Vera's account?
I love I love the ending. I love the speech at the end. I love her progression into being a pacifist. There's a moment where she breaks down in the middle, where you see her become stronger straight after. They're loud, aren't they? God, what are you supposed to think when that's going on behind you? I give up sometimes. Anyway, yeah. I mean, when you see her get stronger and she gets harder inside, I think that's kind of, I don't know if there's a message, but that's the bit that stuck out for me.
I guess my very final question, talking about stronger and harder, is that a fair description of the new Jon Snow that we're going to see in season 5?
What?
The new Jon Snow we're seeing in season 5. Is that a fair description, stronger and harder?
I don't know, you know. I think he gets a bit harder each season because of the things that happen to him, and now he lost Egerton, he hardens a bit more, but he's in a really difficult place this season. He has to deal with being a politician, and that's not something he's good at. So that you'll see his weak side in that.
Look forward to that. Do you have a message for fans about this film before you leave us?
Go and see it. It's a very important film, I hope. but you'll love it, honestly.
Congratulations on a beautiful piece of cinema. What was it about Vera's story that spoke to you, and how nervous were you about playing such an inspirational woman?
I think when I the first time picked up the book, A Testament of Youth, her memoir, her words, I was just surprised of the emotional attachment I got to this woman, a woman that I felt could have been a friend of mine today. She felt so modern and so vivid and strong, and I was just, you know, it was more when I turned the page and she described that she couldn't get on a train without a chaperone, when I realized the difference a woman just 100 years back had from today. And then, of course, the insight of the war, of the loss of, and Vera finding her voice in the end.
You're working with a fantastic cast. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the rest of the guys?
All the boys, Taron, Colin, Kit, were amazing to work with. We had an extremely good relationship. And Kit I knew from before. We did another film a couple of years ago, so he's a dear friend. Dominic, Emily, actors that I've looked up to for a long time. It's amazing to get a chance to work with them. I was very fortunate to be surrounded by such great actors.
For you personally, what have you most taken away from the experience of the film, from bringing Vera's story to life?
I think the fact that I picked up the book. For me, as a Swede, I didn't grow up reading about Vera Brittain in school, and because of this film, I read about Vera Brittain. I got to realize the greatness of this woman, and I hope that the film now, being a part of it, this adaptation coming out, I hope that a lot of other young people will do the same.
You've got a lot of exciting things out this year, some very different projects, things like Ex Machina and Man from U.N.C.L.E. Before you leave us, can you tell us a little bit about those, what we can expect from all that stuff?
Ex Machina is a great film. It was one of the best scripts I had read. It's very, it's a sci-fi thriller, but it's almost like a chambre piece, set in a room with mostly just only 3 characters, really. Go and see it. I saw the film just a few weeks ago. It is a great ride. It's also a very different film. Guy Ritchie's, I've enjoyed his film so much from the past, so I was thrilled to be part of this, and yeah.
My character is George Catlin, who is the eventual husband of Vera Brittain, and it's not really a big part in the film. It's more of a hint of what's coming later on in Vera's life after the film ends. So that's it, yeah, her eventual husband.
Why do you feel that Vera's account of this historic event is so poignant and continues to have such resonance all these hundreds of years later?
Well, I was thinking about that and why her book is so popular and it had such a big impact. And I guess there would be a lot of people that had similar experiences to her. But so maybe why her book had such a big impact is because she's a good writer, and she was able to share her views, her feelings, her emotions that went through, maybe better than someone else might have done. So maybe it's just down to her writing ability and being a great writer.
Your beautiful on-screen future wife, Alicia Vikander, standing right next to you. What do you think makes her such a special talent and a great fit for Vera?
Well, it was such a huge job for her to do, and when I showed up on set and did scenes with her, she immediately drew me in to the world that she had created and to what her character was going through. So I was totally sort of blown away by her performance when I was working with her, and then when I got to see it just before Christmas, see the final product, it's just an incredible job. I just thought it was amazing, really great.
Well, Geoffrey Thurlow represents, I think he's a man of the cloth initially, and he represents someone who comes into this story with an innate sense of calm and sensitivity about war, and I think his attitude toward conflicts is, he's a pacifist essentially. He meets Edward, and they have a very special connection, and that's where Geoffrey falls into the story. So yeah, he's outside of the sort of the main pack. He's there just to give an idea of even more stories that are being told at the same time as Vera's.
Vera's experience was obviously searing and devastating for her, but it's also the strength of her personality, her determination, to break up from the conventions that imprisoned her at the beginning of, in her late teens, at the beginning of her story, and then her, all the losses she suffered and how she survived them with incredible strength and resilience. I think that makes her story very, very inspiring for all of us today still. I think the fact that it's a woman's story, I don't think there are enough stories from the woman's perspective in cinema anyway. But I was fascinated by the fact that it gets across the horror and futility of so much fighting and war without seeing a single shot fired. And we were absolutely determined to stick to that and not veer off into the temptation of showing a bit of fighting or activity at the front. There are just the briefest glimpses of the men she loves actually, at war. But really, it's about what was happening back on the home front and the female experience in particular.
It's a fantastic young cast. Can you tell us particularly a little bit about our leading lady and what made her the right fit for the role?
Alicia is amazing, fantastic as Vera. She's got the absolutely perfect mixture of vulnerability and grit and absolute determination that Vera had, and in putting that emotional authenticity across as well, which is key to making the film work. I mean, it stands or falls on her shoulders, and she does an amazing job.
For you personally, is there a particular scene, a particular moment in the story that really encapsulates kind of the spirit, the message of Vera's account of the war?
Yeah, there's a few, but I think the one that maybe stands out for me the most is when she's in France at the front nursing a dying German officer who up until that point she would have considered the enemy, and she holds his hand as he's dying and pretends to be the woman he loves so that he has a peaceful death. And I think that's a really pivotal moment in her journey when she realises that German, English, whatever nationality, we're all the same, and human beings, war is wrong for all human beings, whatever their language or ethnicity or nationality. So I think that scene for me is really key.
Well, Vera Brittain is an amazing young woman because she's so heartfelt, feisty, full of life, indomitable, and survivor. She teaches us to survive. And actually, Alicia Vikander's like that as well. I mean, she was a ballet dancer from the age of 9 to 15, learned all that discipline and focus, and now she brings that to acting, and she has huge wells of emotion and a kind of luminosity through her eyes. Honestly, anyone who sees her on camera, on screen, are just going to fall in love with her. Women are 50% of the population, and they were more than 90% of the war effort behind the lines. And so, their story's untold. They did all that work, nursing and trying to cure people and provisioning and making ammunitions. And, this is a huge part of the war effort, as it was in the Second World War. And isn't it time their story was recognised and heard? And also remember that they had to put up with the grief, not just the deaths, but the maiming, the injuries of their husbands, of their brothers, of their sons. They showed enormous courage, and we as a nation have a duty to recognise that courage.
It's a fantastic cast and very multifaceted performances, I guess it's fair to.
Within the limited scale of each of their roles, apart from Roland, who has quite a large role, they did such fantastic work. I mean, Colin Morgan, who people may know from Merlin and other productions since then, I mean, he's such a subtle Victor Richardson, quite a timid Victor in the film, whereas Taron Egerton, who's about to hit it very big with The Kingsman and our film, of course, is a kind of loving brother to Vera Brittain, a sort of sibling. And then you've got Kit Harington, who you'll know from Game of Thrones, different hairstyle, and a very different role, a kind of soulful, enigmatic, very deep young man who really understood Vera Brittain and what she wanted out of life. And that's why she fell in love with him, because he understood her. I think an audience from this film, I think young people should take away, never trust your elders, always question them, because they will make you do things that maybe aren't right. And older people should remember, listen to young people, because they are often incredibly wise and they have a fresh pair of eyes on the world. So let's listen to each other and we'll get on a lot better.